means I gotta get my phone out. Hold on. Twitch.
It's not on Twitch, it's YouTube.
Oh, that's right. YouTube.
What's up? We are really low. It could be my volume though.
No, not that. Come on. It's not.
Try now.
I see upcoming. Oh, there it is.
As your audio levels.
Oh, hold on. Let me hear. It's not.
Try now.
I hear myself fine. Tom, you're low. Oh, there it is.
I hear everybody low.
Hold on. Let me hear. It's not. I hear myself fine.
I hear Danny fine.
Tom, you're low. Oh, there it is.
I'm fine.
I hear everybody low.
All right. Yeah, I think I fixed it.
I hear Danny fine. You're low. I'm fine. Alright. Yeah, I think I fixed it. Yeah, you came in better.
It's echoing again.
Oh, we're having the echo.
No, that's because you guys were playing it and it was replaying through your audio. It should go away now that you're not playing it again.
The ghost of John continues to haunt us.
It's going to haunt the unemployment line in about a minute if he doesn't get back on here.
All right. Well, I guess that counts as a sound check. So
I think so. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of TFG Radio. Adam here, and tonight we
You're
have
so
myself,
chipper.
and as you can hear, Danny.
Hey. What's wrong, Adam?
And Tom. I'm just ignoring you.
Buongiorno.
As you do not hear, John is once again absent. So,
Otra Tom strikes again.
yeah, so we'll see. I'll have to go back and make the count who's been on more, although I think Tom's been on more at this point, halfway through the year.
It will also affect his permanent record, just FYI, for anyone wondering.
Yeah.
I mean, if Tom has more episodes in a year than John, I think that's pretty intense and worthy of
damning.
Pantheon. Yeah. Meaning we'll never let him live it down.
All I know is I'm smelling a new haiku topic.
Yeah.
As Danny has alluded to, I am feeling a bit under the weather thanks to Con Crud. So maybe not as chipper as I normally am. And I just want to go to sleep. Today we talk about a few things. ACO happened this past weekend, the last big GT of 9th.
How was it, Adam?
It was fine. It was fine. I mean, for 9th edition, it was just like BAO. It was very chill. Not a lot of nothing new, that's for sure. There was, as always, there's always like one or two questions that seem to crop up. I did have a new set of judges for ACO. It was Jacob Thayer and Jorge Castro from the Hobby Goblins.
Oh, cool. How'd they do?
So they helped judge, which helped a lot with the paint judging. So they helped out, and it was a lot of fun. At BAO, there were more questions. I can't remember now. It's been like 3 weeks. there were different questions people asked then at ACO. ACO, everybody asked about Lookout Sir.
Right.
There was a lot of Lookout Sir questions. The difference between BAO and ACO is that they had a top 8 cut.
Mm.
And so makes things a little easier in terms of how the rankings go, because you just make top 8 and you're in.
Right. Anybody complaining?
Huh?
Anybody complain about the rankings?
No.
Okay, good.
We did have one player go 6-0 and then have to drop it because
Ooh.
this weekend was Father's Day.
Right.
So.
Oh, I was about
that
to
kinda
ask.
threw-
I was about to ask, is it Alan? But you answered my question with the subsequent comment.
No. Alan wasn't even there. But overall, it was a nice event. Atlantic City, the Harrah's is fairly nice. I didn't have a big issue.
How was the food? Usually give us your little Yelp reviews.
I didn't eat any of the. I have a strict dietary needs because of my condition. So,
Which you're legally not allowed to ask him about.
what's the law that says you can't ask me about my medical?
I think, yeah, HIPAA.
HIPAA. Yeah. What's the HIPAA violation?
Breakfast was fine. I just had basically eggs, bacon, and toast, and some fruit on the side. And dinner was limited to like wherever we happened to go or where I went.
Right.
Seth was there, Seth Oster, for those that don't know him. So it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
It was a nice send-off to 9th edition.
Who won?
Final winner was Yanari.
Oh, okay.
believe it was-
Wow.
David Adelman.
Blast from the past. Look at that.
What is with the end of this edition and random factions all of a sudden taking big tournaments?
Yanari, Space Wolves. Like, come on. I mean, still part of that's like, isn't that a great way to end 9th? With just all of a sudden people who didn't, all the latecomers getting their due, right?
Well, and also just the sheer removal of all the balance slates, right? It's just the whole Wild West of the end of the edition, too.
Well, I mean, the balance slates are still there.
Most of them.
I thought they got pared down pretty heavily, though.
They did for like AdMech and things like that, but nobody took AdMech. It was like one AdMech or two.
And they still won't continue to take AdMech. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Hey, I have an idea for an AdMech list.
Oh my God.
It's called a Warhound. I'm just going to take a Warhound,
It's called bring mostly points of something else.
basically.
It was there was the Yanari, there was Oathway, 2 Guardless, a Black Templars player who came in 3rd.
Hey.
Guard came in 2nd. There was Death Guard, Chaos Space Marine, and I believe that was it. I don't know if that's 8 or not.
Yeah, close up.
So it was a lot of fun, and like I said, it was a good send off with not too many issues of note. So.
Oh, hey, well, there you go. Look at that. 9th edition out with a whimper.
But
Or at least a well-behaved event. How about that?
A cordial handshake.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, exactly. A cordial handshake.
so speaking of which, so last thoughts on 9th, Danny?
It was a ride. Like, I feel like 9th edition started really well. I think it was it was fun, and the whole we're getting balanced data slates and things like that, I think was great. But I much like other editions before it, once they started coming out with this kind of the rapid fire, hey, here's a new detachment, or here's new rules, here's White Dwarf rules, here's stuff from the campaign books, etc., etc. Like the game just spiraled away, into a really kind of just bloated world. I think mechanically the game was more or less workable, enjoyable. Like I think of I played a lot of games in ninth, and I don't feel like it was ever really that terrible, but at the same time, especially judging, you see a lot of the same kind of stuff. You see the kind of meta was relatively solved, I feel like, pretty quickly after even a data slate balance, right? I feel like people just kind of knew this is how this works, and I feel like the missions they were fine when you first started playing them, and then very quickly they'd be like, oh, it's basically the same thing every time, right? Like it just became, you pick your faction, you build around your secondaries, and the primaries were all relatively homogenous, right? There weren't a lot of primaries that were radically different than the others in terms of what army composition or what you needed to do. It was kind of like, well, you got to have forward push, you got to take some center objectives or no man's objectives, and you just got to play that game, or you just blew people out of the fucking water. But I think it was fine. Like I'm not like, oh my god, ninth was garbage. I think there were garbage moments. I think sometimes the way that they chose to balance the game was often very flawed. But I think overall the edition was, let's say, the proof is in the pudding. Tournaments are still bigger than they were at the end of ninth than they were at the start of ninth. There seems like there's more players, there's more tournament players, right? Like so I think more and more people are playing, and that's, I don't know how else you argue that's not a success.
Tom?
Well, I was gonna basically say all that, so Danny kind of stole my thunder, but I don't know. I think I'm ultimately in agreement. I think for me, as a player who's not someone who has the time to super combo or super list crunch or practice, I really enjoyed ninth in the beginning because it was so clear cut and concise, and I felt like I could wrap my head around all the rules at once. And then towards the end, I didn't have quite as much addition burnout as I did going from 7th to 8th, but I definitely felt it in that I was just like, all right, just let me start with a simpler rule set. Let me just kind of jump into something where it's kind of fresh for everybody. It's a little more streamlined because it's at least the start of something, and I don't have to worry about everyone's 30 editions, let alone my 30 editions of things in order to play. And yeah, the missions, I think ultimately it got to a point where it was like, yeah, maybe I don't have the time to, game up and study all the missions, but it got to a point where it was just also very much like, well, it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter if I know how to play the missions because I can barely play the army. So what's the point? So just coming at it from more of a casual perspective, I guess, that casual competitive, if you will.
Yeah, like Danny said, it had its ups and downs. I think beginning was fine. Then there was the Dark Eldar Custodes Admech year, or when those were released.
Those were the dark times, the times of the Empire.
And so I think towards the end though they were able to course correct for the most part, at least for Marines. I don't know about everybody else. Space Wolves in particular. Yeah, it was all Space Wolves. It wasn't even Iron Hands.
Yep.
Space Wolves is what everybody was taking. So we'll see. I mean, I know they wanted to make 10th edition simpler, especially as a point of entry. So, speaking of which, I guess we'll move on to that. So all the rules are out, all the indexes are out. We're still waiting on the GT packet, which we'll assume will be out fairly soon after the release or on the day of the release. They did put out a designer's commentary that clarified some things, but not everything. So we'll have to see if they put something more out on Saturday or shortly after the release of 10th edition, the official release.
Day one FAQ. Here we go.
It's fine. They did it for Shatterpoint. So
I mean, it's just it is what it is. Like, I mean, people who are sincerely upset about that just don't seem to grasp of, I mean, how many video games at this point come out with a day one patch, right? Or day one update. It's just, it's an incredibly complicated game with a lot of moving parts, and you're just not going to catch everything immediately. And not to mention, once rules start going live, and it's not just, hey, we've got, I don't know how many eyes they might have. Let's just say 10. They have 10 sets of eyes. Looking at the rules for balance or whatever, and then, that's very different. No matter how good those eyes may be, that's very different than having, several 100,000 eyes, right? If people reading, looking, and you're gonna, things are gonna come up. So I mean, I don't know. People, I think today a lot of people who have no knowledge of what it was like to play in third or fourth or fifth, where if there was a question, if there was like, oh, this seems like a misprint, or damn, this seems way too good, you just dealt with that for years. Right? And it was up to whatever local TO, local event, whatever, to actually address it. But there was no like, oh, hey guys, we're going to do a balance update. We recognize this is, this is bad, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, nope, this is just stupid good. And it's going to be stupid good for years because Games Workshop did not answer questions and did not do updates.
So hashtag deal.
I think it would help the, people who are newer. And when I say newer, I mean you started maybe in 7th or 8th. Like you started when Games Workshop was kind of coming out of the coma and engaging again. And it's like, there's a different way to do this that Games Workshop used to do, and I don't think anyone actually wants to go back to that. Because if you take the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia away, it was a really crappy time to play this game. Unless you're just, again, playing with friends where you can gentleman's agreement through everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, too, that, like, there is some, kind of modernized expectations of, like, oh, I purchase a kind of living product. I expect X, Y, and Z things. But I would say, even just to follow on your video game example, video game developers can probably pull that off easier than GW could, even if GW, and I'm not saying they're not, was trying at 110% capacity. Because with video games, it's code, you can locate, you can identify things, you can balance things rather quickly. It's all basically ones and zeros at the end of the day. This is a very, very in-depth game with a lot of pieces. This is like, I mean, the chess analogy, 3D, whatever, you take it. It's just that much harder to balance. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be perfect. And I think really you just see two ways of handling it. Either you take things into your own hands because that's the way, you were raised and you want to break your own rules, go for it. Congratulations. Just don't act self-righteous about it. You want to just go with the flow until things get updated? Cool. Welcome to the club. That's what probably most people are going to do.
I mean, let's be real. That we've already seen TOs start to make adjustments even before the official FAQ, and this is assuming we get one, is out when the release is out. So whether it's from local TOs here in the US or the German TOs or anybody outside now, TOs are welcome to do whatever they want for their events. So we'll have to wait and see. So me personally, I choose to sometimes wait until we either get or don't get one and then go from there. We are limited in somewhat in what we can do. So it's hard to say. Right now, I think, Danny, we talked about where this basically looks like a cleaned up 9th edition.
Yeah, I mean, rules wise, it is 9th edition. It's not an engine jump by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even really a redesign or a major polishing. This is really just 9th with some some new stuff and some stuff deleted, but it's really not a mechanically much different beast outside of how information is presented, right? Like, really they had to index because they wanted to, not because the rules didn't support the old version for the most part. It was entirely because they wanted to rebalance everything, right? Like, and you can't do that piecemeal, right? They're just like, well, screw it, blank slate. Let's take a look at everything. And, having gotten some games in with it now, and like I said, it feels in many ways, very Ninth to me, which is fine, because I don't think Ninth as a system was severely flawed. But, I just feel like there's so much to consider, and it's really hard to tell what it looks like, because we can look at a paper. I mean, there's some very egregious examples, like, Wraith Knights and Fate Dice. Like, that's, I think, a pretty clear case of, like, yeah, that's just probably too good. But, how to fix that without completely... I mean, I'll put it this way. Remember when custos were so dominant, and then they're like, hey, guess what? You're irrelevant. Like, no one likes that. Because, yes, there's the meme of, power gamers, whack players, whatever you want to use, who are going to jump armies all the time to have, like, the best edge. The vast majority of people who play, even at tournaments, have an army or two that they love. That's who they identify. That's their labor. And so, basically telling the majority of players, like, hey, this small population of players was using this in kind of, not good faith, get wrecked. It's like, that sucks, right? We had a few in our community who were kind of diehard Custodes players, and when those, they were riding high when the book was good, and then when the book stopped being good, it was like, oh, cool, sweet. Now my army sucks. That's really enjoyable for me. Thank you.
So, Danny, I'll go with Tom first. Tom, having looked at all the index cards, anything that stands out for you, or anything that you're interested in, because you play a bunch of armies, so.
Yeah. If you're looking, are you talking mechanics or specific faction?
Any of the factions that you play that you more likely leaning to actually playing.
Well, right now I think I'm leaning towards Space Marines, which is a good way to, if you've got a variety of things, I think Space Marines, if you're kind of just trying to figure things out, is a good place to start. They're pretty much always hey, here's an army that can do well. You have to be really good to do really good with them, but they're not going to punish you for being bad with them. And right now, like, I'm kind of figuring out that there's a lot of interesting possibilities and combinations in that codex, especially because there's so many damn units you could potentially choose from. But the key thing for me is just the idea of pairing leaders, and I think this probably applies to all the codexes to some degree, or indexes. Pairing the right leader with the right unit makes that a totally different tool. So, like, I'll give you the example of right now I actually really like Primaris Reavers. Primaris Reaver stock up over at this house, and you could attach a Primaris Reaver Lieutenant to them and give them lethal hits, which is actually pretty insane when they have precision. Or you could tag them with a Phobos Librarian who gives them infiltrate and also makes it so you can't shoot them outside of 12, and they're -1 to hit always. So it's like all of a sudden how you use that unit becomes two very different ways. And I think we're going to see a lot of that with armies that have access to a lot of different leaders, combinations. I think armies like Custodes and Votann and Knights, which are very small, indexes with a very limited number of models, you're not going to see that kind of play as much. But the leader unit combo is something I really enjoy so far.
So you're going Space Marines?
Yes, sir.
Danny, you going with your bugs?
Of course. I mean, just the advantage
That's
of
not
having...
the list I'm seeing in the chat.
What?
What the list that you're making in the chat?
Your Jank
well,
Imperium
that's because
list.
that's because I'm, like I said, I want to pick up an Imperium army, even though I technically have knights. We have knights, right? Bugs Bunny communism. We have knights. my with Tyranids, I just have so many models. I can kind of just build whatever. So I'm kind of in that first blush excitement phase of getting to try out a bunch of stuff, especially things I haven't really used in a long time. So that's really exciting for me. Doesn't mean it's going to be good, but it's still fun. I think Tyranids are they're kind of in this. Honestly, they're in the same spot that we've been in a while, with outside of the rare moment of Crusher Stampede, where in a pillow-fisted edition, we're pretty pillow-fisted even amongst that, but we have really great board control, really good at scoring secondaries. So all of the games I've played, I have won when I'm able to control and play the mission and not really worry about doing big damage. And the game I've lost is because I didn't have an army composition that worked with playing missions, right?
Okay.
So I think good Tyranid players will do fine. I think Tyranids go back, though, even more so to being a very low floor, high ceiling kind of army. You're either going to be good with them, and that's going to be a nightmare for a lot of people, or you're not going to be good and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to get punished for it real bad.
Yeah, kind of in the same boat in regards to Chaos Space Marines, where it's like there's a lot of stuff I want to try, and I don't know if it's good. What are your thoughts on close combat in general? How effective will it be?
I mean, I think
You think
ahead.
what?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I said that's where my conundrum is.
I think close combat is in even more of a position than it was in 9th, meaning because lethality is toned down, close combat outside of a few units, right? Like there's definitely some killers still out there, but there's not that many, not as much as there used to be. And so close combat, I'll put it this way, if you're trying to win by tabling your opponent, close combat is not the way to do it. But I still think close combat is inherently very good because it is about board control, right? Because it's about snaking objectives. It's about setting tempo. It's about keeping people pinned or keeping them out of, denying them the ability to do what they want to do. I do think if anyone has really a big place to complain, it's close combat vehicles and monsters, because now there's no way to hide. It's like, haha, and I love my hero specs and they're great, but it's like, cool, I got into combat, haha, I'm doing some damage, now I'm safe. And it's like, no, I'm not. I still get to get shot at. They don't need to fall back.
Yeah,
their tanks can still blow me to hell. Sweet.
Yeah. I've been building lists, and I don't know, I think it's hard for me because I'm usually close combat oriented,
As am I.
and I've been building shooty lists and just trying to figure out how to make it work. So
See, it's funny because the opposite has happened for me. I've always built shooty lists, but this time I fit around because of the non-lethality of close combat. With the exception of Gilman, who literally punched an armature off the table like it wasn't a big deal, without rerolls, by the way. I've found that for me, close combat has been like the first time where I'm like, oh, yeah, it is about board control. Like I am figuring these things out, because there were like one or two moments where like, oh yeah, maybe my Reavers can kill this thing, or maybe my Blade Guard can kill this thing, and it's like they're just sitting there slapping at each other for like 2 turns. Right. But then I'm also kind of like, well, wait a minute, because of the durability of my units and the fact that I'm bringing enough of them and they're up there in close combat, I'm tying up his pieces, allowing me to go do other things with them. Like I was playing against John's Knights, and granted it was his first game, it was still really close against me. But I used my Reavers as a sacrifice ploy, and I held up like his entire right side of the board for 3 turns because I blocked him in. He had to re-engage, and then I just kept falling back and basically being like, "Hey, I'm here. You have to deal with me before you run away."
Right. You guys have played much more 10th so far than I have. So, what are your thoughts on the missions in general so far?
I like them. I mean, I'm a big fan of Warcry, so I love the way Warcry does things, which is basically how now 10th edition does, where you have, 4 unique decks, one that tells you what the mission is, one that tells you what the twist of the mission is, one that sets up deployment, right, and one that sets out terrain, right, like table layout. And so I really like it because every game has felt very different. And especially in playing my last game against Dom's Blood Angel, her teammate Dom's Blood Angels, beautiful army. Um, we did the mission. It was like, oh, okay, so really no man land. These three objectives are what matter because they're the only ones you can score on. Like cool. And then we did the twist card or the whatever they call it, the battlefield whatever situation. And it was, oh, guess what? Instead of using the fixed deployment map, players place their objectives. So it was like a fun game of like, oh, well, now they're not evenly distributed. I purposely stack them to one flank where I'm like, I only need to fight here, right? These are the objectives I need to care about, right? Which is, I think, what ended up honestly winning me that game because I had really, from the beginning, planned of like, this is how it's going to go. But it was very much like, oh, if there was another thing like, Night Fight or whatever their version is or whatever, it's like my game plan totally changes and maybe I don't win that game or maybe I even have an easier time. Who knows, right? Like, and I really like that because God, I played a lot of Ninth, and it definitely even between books, chapter approves, it always felt samey, right? Like it generally pretty much always felt more or less the same, and so getting to play where maybe each game won't feel the same is I think going to be really fun, and so so far I'm actually really liking 10th. I've played against Space Marines and Double Oath of Moment. Whirlwind bullshit. Not the Nerf gun Marines yet though, but and I do think there's some imbalances, but that's kind of like welcome to 40K. That's just kind of what it is. And if
yeah, I've really liked it too, and for me the two that have kicked in a number of times have been, oh, your reroll strat is 2 CP. And I cannot tell you how many times that's been like, oh, well, that cost me a unit I could have killed that is now hurting me this turn that I could have eliminated. It's incredible. Those small little details, or like, there's another card where it's like, if anyone rolls a 6 to advance, then you're taking a mortal wound. It's like, oh, okay, well now I got to worry about that guy who's only got 2 wounds left. I do really like the variety. I like that you can go between picking a fixed set of 2 missions, or you can just do cards to keep things on your toes. I think that system's great. And ultimately, yeah, I think I can echo, even though I've been pretty much playing the same exact list where Danny's been playing kind of variation, with a lot more variation. I can say that I had the same feeling of like, it's not just because this is a new edition. Each game feels different. It feels unique. And I think the fact that I also think a part of that is the terrain rules being a little more straightforward and simple is also contributing to that. Because now it's
everything gets cover.
Yeah, everything gets cover. Okay, congratulations. Unless you have an open firing lane, everything gets cover. God bless you. Have a good game. Like, that's just, now I don't have to worry about obscurity in some cases, and in the times that I do, it's just so much simpler. It's like, okay, is that a knight? Okay, it doesn't matter what the table looks like. Is that, I'm fighting against a similar army? Okay, now I kind of care, but it's not as complex. It's not as intense. It's just simpler. And I think that makes the game play better.
How was playing against John's Knights with the towering?
That was fun because I got to basically be like, oh man, I gotta move out of. Oh no, wait, I can just shoot him because I could see him across the table. And in that same way, he was just so happy that I couldn't just hide everything. And for me, I'm happy I didn't have to hide everything. There was like one unit that I technically hid because I could actually hide it behind the footprint of something. And that was just in case he alpha struck. But the rest of it, I was like, oh, well, he can see me, so might as well put the rest of my army out here. Like, who cares?
Right.
So it just made that whole deployment like less finagling, less like edging and midging with all of the models against the ruins and this and that. It just made it better. And then everything had cover, so it was just like, all right, I don't feel like I'm getting super blasted off the table here. Now, granted, it did help that I went first, but I didn't even take out his shooting knight. I just killed his gallant. Just like and that took my entire army to do it, might I add. Like both whirlwinds, both ballistas, Gilman even throwing some shots in there, and like I barely picked it up.
Okay. Speaking of army lists, for a while, a lot of us used the old pencil and paper or Excel spreadsheets. GW finally released their new Army Builder app.
Yeah, like
Initial
fucking
thoughts.
out of nowhere. Like that's the thing. Like I didn't think we'd see that for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, here it is," and we're like, "Oh shit, okay." It would have been nice to have some hype before that, but
Yeah.
I think I really like it. It's easy to use. I really wish I had had it for all my practice games because those games took so long. Me having to look through my phone on PDFs because I was lazy and didn't print stuff out. But having it on my phone and playing with it, of like it's real fast to build lists. It's not 100% functional, which not a shock, but still pretty good. And being able to look at specific stats, only abilities, being able to have it all exploded, so you basically see the whole card, or just focus on one thing. I think it's really nice. So I think it's actually a pretty successful piece of software so far for what it is.
Okay.
You know, I don't have a lot of complaints.
Tom, your thoughts? Thoughts and prayers?
My thoughts and prayers and conspiracy theories on this is that they actually want people to. They built a great piece of software before 10th, and then they said, all right, the only way this will work is if 10th is easier and simpler and streamlined. So they changed the game so it would fit the app, not the other way around. And now they're getting us all hooked on Subscription Hammer. And you can follow me on my conspiracy Twitter at. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's great. I really like it. Same thing Danny said, basically. It just makes it so much easier to have everything in one single place digitally that's easy to build and easy to reference. It's like, my God,
I mean,
why couldn't they have been doing this from the whole time? And I'll take a, quote, simpler edition to have that accessibility.
nobody wanted to play power level, but now we're all forced to play power level.
Yeah. This just sounds like power level with more steps.
Yeah, that's, what is it, the other one that's going around is power level is dead, long live power level.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, it's fine.
Of course it's fine. They got rid of all the complex stuff, so of course it's gonna work.
I mean, this is the thing of a lot of people that I've seen complain of, like, I really miss blah blah blah. Pretty much every single one of them has been someone, even if I don't like personally know them, I know them from the competitive scene, right? Like I see them at tournaments, or I see them at tournaments in places I don't live at, right? And so it's like, cool, yeah, I get it. When you're a tournament player, like there's a certain granularity that you want. It's a whole other meta game of how efficiently can you build your list and with what.
Yeah.
And most casual players are like, lol, who cares? And again, this is speaking from the judge/TO perspective. Those are the people who pay your bills. Those are the people who make your events fun. Those who make your events successful are the guys who don't care about that stuff. They care about coming, having a good time, rolling dice and playing, and making the game easier for them to access, making the game easier for them to engage with is going to make it more successful. And if that bothers you, sorry, but it sounds like it more bothers you either A, because you don't like change, which we all get, or B, you kind of like the elitism of, well, I can play this kind of weird metagame of the game I play better than somebody else, so therefore I am better, which is like, okay, bro, good job.
I think I saw a tweet that was like, I think it might have been even in our chat, where someone's like, look, I understand you don't like change and you're upset that you can't list build whether or not your Primaris librarian brought his lunch that day.
Right.
But let's just appreciate the fact that it's all simple. Yeah, I loved that tweet.
I mean, like I said, like people have already said, it's basically AOS Army Builder, and that's the way AOS is. So. Just gotta go with the flow.
Which is fine. Like, if you want, I'll just put it this way. I think an army-based game, right? Because we're not talking a skirmish game. We're talking, or a squad game. This is an army-based game. I just think it's really not necessary to have that level of granularity of, every guy has, this weapon costs this much because blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just, for ease of play and for speed of play and enjoyment of play, just bone it down. If you really want that kind of like really nitty gritty stuff, I think there's just better game systems that are probably skirmish or squad based that are much more going to be much more up your alley. And I think that's totally fine to accept that. Well, maybe army level games just nowadays aren't for you because the literal theory of game design has moved away from that at this scale.
So, thumbs up from everybody for the Army Builder.
Yeah.
Combined with the issues that Battlescribe has, I'm curious how this will affect Battlescribe users. More importantly, the subscriptions.
I mean,
for those that don't remember, Battlescribe, the what are they called?
The owner?
Developers?
Coders? I guess the coders that do the actual codexes have said they're not doing 10th edition updates because the actual developer is being lazy and not updating or fixing the app, which they need in order to create the 10th edition files. So, kind of like what happened with, for those that remember, the Army Builder program back in 8th. It was one of those things everybody used up until it got too much for them to handle, and they stopped working on it. Oh well.
Yeah, I mean, this is if GW really wanted to get rid of Battlescribe, this is the time to do it. They need to actually make sure they're getting their app, because there's I playing with jank, because that's what I do. I couldn't fully do things that by the rules are legal, but it really wouldn't do for me. And so, okay, there's minor things, but again, unless you're building like a weird-ass list that's using mostly Imperial agents and Allied knights and blah, 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 I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Okay.
But yes, I was doing that.
So, as I alluded to earlier, TOs have already taken a stand on certain armies or list builds or rules before the book is even released. I personally do not. I usually say to wait and see how everything turns out. I mean, they may have played a bunch of games and think it should be what they ruled. Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's way too early to make decisions, especially, because there's been a lot of chatter about a day one FAQ, right? We already saw with the Death Watch, with the Kraken rounds, that they are making changes already. So I think a lot of the big stuff, like Wraith Knights and their D cannons and Fate Dice is, stupid. I think they're aware, and so I think giving them a chance to respond is important, just because the issue is always this. If every TO starts making their own decisions about what is or is not good for the game, we're going to go back to the days of playing in one tournament and playing in another tournament are two vastly different things. No one's actually playing the same 40K anymore. Right, because you've got people who are in heavily comped environments, people who are in not so comped environments, people who have wildly different, FAQ answers. And that's bad for the game, because again, I think a lot of, especially players now, don't remember these days of, playing at the battle bunker in, in Orange County was a radically different experience of playing 40K than it was at Game Empire, right? At the old store. Even at the Glendale Games Workshop store, right? They were just, every little scene, every little store was its own very distinct version of 40K, and that actually made it really hard to branch out. It made it really hard to build community, because guys would be so butthurt, and absolutely would not go to an event 20-30 minutes away because they're like, oh, I don't like the way they do that. And it's cool, so how are you going to have these big events? How are you going to have this kind of unified community when everyone's doing their own thing? And that's because TLs go off and they think they have solved 40K. They think they understand 40K. And maybe they do sometimes better than the actual designers. I'm not saying they don't. but I do think it is way too early of this edition's life to be able to make that claim that you understand how this should be better than the people who made the game, right? Especially because we haven't seen their reaction to some of this stuff yet.
I'm wondering if part of it is just a "hey, look at me" type of thing.
I mean, I think there's honestly part of that of just it's a way to get attention. It's a way to get shock value, to get people to, kind of look at you on the internet. But, I think it's always really important to remember that the internet isn't real. And, it's not. Like, you can get people being like, yeah, man, that's right. Fuck Games Workshop. Fuck, fuck the elves. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, but this guy is never going to come to your tournament. This guy was never, ever going to make your tournament or your community better. Like, he plays in his garage or he lives on a continent away. Meanwhile, the, 3 really dedicated Eldar players who are like, oh, man, I wanted to bring Eldar, and now you're saying I can't. Or, oh, I had this really cool list because I love Wraith constructs, so of course I have my Wraith Knight. Now it's like, well, okay, I guess I'm not really welcome here. Right? Or even just the little Timmy who's like, oh man, I got, my dad got me 2 boxes of Strike Force Augustus and I've got all these Desolation Marines. They're so fun. I love the way they look. And then it's like they show up to a tournament. They're like, yeah, actually we changed the rules or you can't do this with them. They're going to be like, what? Why would I play here? Mean,
let's be fair. The Germans didn't do anything to the Marines.
Yeah, right. Which is another huge, again, this is part of why you have to be really careful of making decisions about what is quote-unquote too powerful, because here to tell you, if you just look at the math, Desolation Marines are stupid fucking good, right? They just, especially in a Gilliman list where you get 2 Oath of Moments, they're basically guaranteeing 2 things die plus 2 objective holders. Right, their big guns get to go into hard targets or important targets and annihilate them, while the little guns just get to be like, oh yeah, that little squad you have over there who's helping you get a secondary or might be useful later in the game? No, they die too. Yeah. It's just one of those things. Yeah,
that's kind of the problem when you do things like that is you don't, either you have a blind spot for it, but a particular army or unit or whatever, so you don't really see what everyone else sees. And so you don't do anything to them while you're, quote-unquote, fixing everything else.
Right.
Or you really like them, and you don't do anything to them when you do stuff to everything else.
Right. So, or your community might be heavy into a faction that, would react negatively, and so you have an inkling of, oh, if I do this, my event will be negatively impacted.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, everyone has Marines, so...
Yeah, exactly. So now all of a sudden you are making a decision based on not what's best for the game, what's best for, your community. You're actually making a decision based on what's best for your perception within the community, which is not a good place to be. Right? You're not going to make good decisions that way. I'll put it this way. If, Adam remembers, when, the ITC was much more driving the ship of competitive play, we would have day-long arguments about is something too good, right? Getting people literally mining social media, mining Reddit, mining even Daka for let's look for arguments, let's look for stats, let's look for all of these different examples of is this too good before we do anything about it, right? It was not just oh, we don't like this, and again, sometimes those arguments would go on for a week. And
especially in the early especially once there was a new season.
Yeah. And again, I think that's why ITC was generally so successful, is because we were slow to do things like that. We did take our time, and I get we live in a world of the immediate now, but it's just you want good answers and you want good results. You have to have time, you have to have patience, and you have to gather data, right? You just have to.
I mean, but how long do you wait? Because the first books come out in, it says autumn or whatever, but
right. I would guess September.
Probably September, October.
I mean,
and the first tournaments start almost immediately, so.
I mean, I think you have to let things just play out and see what happens.
Right, the first month.
Yeah. And again, assuming Games Workshop makes no response, right? Which, I don't know if that's a good assumption to make. I think that they have shown, again, the Death Watch thing gives me hope of like they're listening, they're aware that there might be issues, and so I think you got to give them a chance to do their job, right? Like I'm totally fine trashing people when they fuck up their job because they fucked up their job. But you got to give them a chance to fuck up. You got to give them a chance to do it. That's not. Yeah. It's not fair otherwise.
And this is a different enough GW where we know, okay, there is a chance they could actually do something right. This isn't the GW of 3rd edition where they spent literal years proving that they would never get back to people because they had not done so in years.
I think. I don't know. I think part of it also is just as I mentioned, where it's the hey, look at me, but also so now if they do make changes, they can claim credit for, causing those changes. So it's just kind of weird. But that's just me. That's what my conspiracy theory had.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory. That's just human nature, especially nowadays, where people just on the internet want to chase clout. Right, and being able to, pretend like, oh, well, we were the ones who did blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, guy.
Dude.
Because the reality is there's people gullible enough who'll be like, fuck yeah, that's why, this person is the best, is because they made GW do this. Do you have evidence that that's true? Well, post hoc ergo propter hoc.
Dude, my tweet about why 10th sucks was liked by 30 people and 785 bots. So don't tell me that I don't have clout. 785 bots can't be wrong. Just saying.
The bots know what they're talking about. So Danny, you said you're going with NIDS for the foreseeable future.
I got 4 more games in in Jeff's league, in our SoCal or our Los Angeles league, and then once I finish those out, or if I actually get extra days to play, I will probably jump into World Eaters or Chaos Knights. As you were making fun of me earlier for my lists, I am still trying to think of an Imperium list. I have a bunch of random Imperial agents, bits and bobs, so I'm like, I might just literally do a Warhound with some Imperial agents and some Knights and probably Sisters of Silence. Be technically Adeptus Custodes. Or, actually, my thought was to do AdMech so I could just do the Rad Bomb shit.
Oh, yeah.
Because I still get, you still get that. Whatever your primary faction, you get all that stuff. So I'm like, the Rad Bomb's like, that's cool. And my Warhound.
Can you use the Warhound, though?
It's 1,100
points. 500 points.
But it's not limited. But them is you can just, at least in what they previewed, yeah, you can just take one as an Imperial. In an Imperial army, you get one, and the only one you can take is a Warhound.
But don't they also have a rule of allied points can only be up to a certain number, or is that only for demons so far?
That's demons.
That's demons. CSM has that for the rubrics and stuff.
Yeah, that's only in demons, because in knights, the rules for allied with knights is you can take 1 big knight or 3 little knights. No point limit. It's just 1 big knight or 3 little knight, up to 3 little knights. Same with Chaos Knights. And then with the Imperial Agents at 2,000 points, you get 2 leader units and 2 retinue units max. Right? No points dictation. So I think it's just literally like, hey, if you're Imperium, you can just take a Titan. Right? You get 1, but the only Titan you can play at 2,000 points is a Warhound. Right, because the Reaver, I think, is 2,200. And then the Warlord is 3,500.
Yeah, we're not sure if this Inquisitor is considered puritanical or radical, considering he's definitely purging
Certainly
the enemies.
Not subtle.
He's purging the enemies of mankind, but he's bringing a Warhound? He constantly is requisitioning Warhounds.
I mean, if I
9 out of 10
if I was an
Forge Worlds hate
Inquisitor...
him.
If I was an Inquisitor, you absolutely better believe I'd have a fucking Titan with me if I could.
Yeah, you'd be that guy that's just like 2-minute attention span. All right, send in the Warhound, and you're in orbit and like it's killing stuff. All right, you know what? Forget this. Exterminatus this. We're going to the next system. But sir, the Warhound. I'll get another one.
Just beam that fucker back up and let's go.
Tom, you're sticking with Marines for the foreseeable future?
Yes, I think so. There is a
Because
small
you're not in the
chance.
league, so...
No, I'm not in the league, so I'm free to do whatever I want. But I may do is I may switch to knights because I do like Imperial Knights and I like seeing how they played. I'm afraid that with Imperial Knights I'll run into the same issue of I'm not good enough at moving where I can't make mistakes with few little models. I can make mistakes when I have lots of models, but not when I have fewer models.
Run 14 armigers. You'll be
I know,
fine.
right? Oh, fair enough. I There is a part of me that really is thinking about custodes for some reason, an army I haven't thought about since late 8th, even before they got their super boost. So I might consider them again. I don't know. I find myself toying with list ideas, but they're still pricey for what you got to bring. Oh boy.
Yeah. I think I'll stick with CSM for now, because I don't know where I put my Thousand Suns. I'm supposed to be in the league, but I don't know. I'm supposed to be in the league, but I think I'm just going to drop because I don't have time. With Hammer Wrath coming up and some issues with Hammer Wrath, so we'll see. I think anything else?
I mean, if you're a Tyranid player, invest in some Tyrant Guard. They're real good.
If you're a Space Marine
That's
player,
been
I'm just saying, take a look at Reavers and Whirlwinds. Just take a look. It's in a book.
Take a look.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out. I think I'm going to take a vehicle heavy list with shooting.
Yeah,
Space
I mean,
Marines.
shooty vehicle lists seem like they are naturally going to have an advantage in this edition just because, melee is not as good, especially if you're a vehicle or monster, because there's no protection in melee. And chances are you don't hit hard enough to really make it work, to really be like, yeah, I'm going to hit something to kill it. Yay. So, not ideal. Like, knights work because, the little dudes have 8 objective control, which is insane. So, they're really good at taking objectives, which is what you want to do in melee. And then, but shooty vehicles, because vehicles are tougher, right? People are joking of that, it's like, oh, T9, what does that matter? I'm like, no, T9, T10, T11 matters.
Matters when you didn't change Melta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when all of a sudden a last cannon's wounding you on 5s, it's like, oh, okay, and chances are you have cover. So if you have a 2+ save, it's like, okay, well, lol, you wound me on 5s and I save on 4s. Okay, it's just, I think a shooty vehicle list isn't, if it has access to the usual stuff, if it has access to rerolls, if it has a way to boost durability or boost output, I think it's going to be really good. I do think the one struggle it will run into, depending on who it is and what else you fill out with, is playing missions, because the tactical secondaries is the best way to play. And I mean literally for scoring points, because you can just consistently score more points. And I think outside of very specific matchups, you're never going to get 40 points on your secondary if you take fixed. But you can do that with tactical. So you have to build a list with that in mind of I need to be able to go places. I need to be able to do things. So that would be my thought. If you're going to do a shooty vehicle list, you still need things that can go out and get table quarters or go out and do an action somewhere. Not that they don't call them actions, but they are. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just think that's going to be essential to kind of winning. And games are low scoring now. Jeez. Unless you really devastate somebody. I'm going to be real suspicious of anyone who comes up at LVO this year and is like, oh, okay, yeah, it was a 90-15 for me. I'd be like, how?
Yeah, there was towards the end of the weekend at ACO, there were a few games that quote unquote finished in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And they had already left. So usually what happens when usually what I do when that happens is I zero them out, double loss,
Right.
and usually one of them will come to find me, and then I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
I think in most cases it was just like, yeah, he saw my army, and they just said you win and walked away. So,
Yeah. It's like they took a look at my armory and were like, you know what, bro, I'm just gonna wait for next edition. But thanks, bro.
yeah. There was another one where the guy killed Bellicor in turn 1, top of 1.
My
was the first
God.
thing that died. And the guy was like, all right, I quit. So,
No, well, I mean, people. This is one of those, like, I swear, like, this and chess clocks are like the easiest ways to start a fight on 40K social media. But like, people being like, oh man, that's stupid. Like, why would you stop? I'm like, speaking from a TO's perspective and a judge's perspective, I don't own anybody's time. If someone is sitting at my event, they're like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, okay, well, that yes poses problems for me, but you don't owe me your time and I don't own it. So do what you gotta do, bro. Like,
yeah. And also you paid your money, so
right.
that's the kind of end game here. So
well, it's just people act like, no, someone came out to the event, they got to play their games for their opponent's sake and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't own somebody's time, nor do they owe you their time, right? Like,
right.
Sorry. Like, they get to just walk away if they want to, because you should not, you shouldn't be investing time into this game if you're not on some level enjoying what you're doing.
Yep.
And if the game stops being enjoyable, stop. Real simple.
All right. I think we'll call it there.
Adam has to go take more NyQuil and pass out.
Huh?
I said Adam has to take more NyQuil and pass out.
Fuck yeah.
He's not even lying. Just like you.
Dude.
Fuck me up,
two all-day flights, and then pressing the flesh all weekend. Yeah. It's funny because this is the first time since I started, since after COVID.
Right.
Only took 2 years.
Yeah, well. It's bound to happen to you. It happens to us all.
Yeah.
It do be like that sometimes.
I did mention the Hobby Goblins helping out. Also, just a reminder, they're one of our new sponsors because they provided the prizes, which was a chainsword for 40K and a giant mace.
Yeah, it looks sick.
So they do 3D printing and painting. If you're in the Frontline community group, there were pictures of us holding some of their props.
It's pretty cool looking.
So, yeah, they're actually pretty beefy too. Trying to get some of the props, see how much they want to charge, but just click on the link in the description and check them out. Really good bunch of guys. They help out at all of our events when they can. So, also don't forget Hammerhead at hammerheadgames.net or the Shark Tank. You saw some of the pictures. You saw Tony sitting on his throne of Leviathan boxes.
It's a lot of boxes.
So many.
Does it look like allocation was a problem this year?
Yeah, I know.
Tell the distributor
Also,
I want him to know it was me.
Gameology, GameologyGames.com is our other sponsor. They are helping out with Hammer of Wrath. If you haven't already, please sign up for Hammer of Wrath. Just look it up on BCP. It's already up. We are giving away a golden ticket for the winner. So sign up as soon as possible. So, and I believe that is it. Tom, any last words?
Well, as a get better present, and because I said I would, I finished your Angron, Adam. So
My Angron.
your Angron,
There
and
you go.
per previous specifications, I painted the base but did not base it. So because you like to do that part.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So
Oh,
hope you feel better, bud.
Thank you. Me too. Danny?
Get well soon, Viejo, and you know what? Play games, be nice to each other, especially with a new edition.
Yeah, so hopefully everyone has fun at the very least with the new edition, not complain too much. But again, thank you everybody for listening. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Bye.
Laters.